I mean, it's always been part of my life. My father, my dad was originally a truck mechanic, a mobile truck mechanic, but eventually his career took him into owning a race team. So I was incredibly lucky from the beginning that I was kind of born into a racing family. It was just grassroots racing cars that he ran at that point. But yeah, fortunate enough that at 4 years old, he gave me a go-kart to go around the playing fields in. And obviously, being a 4-year-old kid, absolutely loved it. And that was the start of my karting career.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Driven Engineers podcast. Today I'm joined by Scott Mansell, founder of Driver61. Driver61 was built to educate and support people in motorsport, from drivers and sim racers through to engineers and early career professionals, using real experience from inside the industry. Scott's career spans racing and coaching at a high level, and in this episode we'll be talking about the career decisions and lessons that shape that journey and what others can learn from it. So without further ado, Scott, how are you?
I'm very well, Matt. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Little intro for you there, but I think it's always good for our guests just to maybe let our listeners know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been very fortunate over my career to be involved in motorsport. Of course, we're here because we love the industry. But I was, I karted in my early career. I then moved into racing cars, did reasonably well, but unfortunately had a very typical story where we ran out of money. But I continued in the industry, found ways to kind of make my work move into the industry that I loved. In 2015, I started Driver61, originally to help amateur racing drivers get on track and enjoy their racing more. Over the years, things have changed. We've built a bit of a kind of media assets on YouTube and Instagram. We now have 1.5 million subscribers on YouTube, where we talk about Formula One, engineering.
This is what it looks like to live out the dream of 1 million Formula One fans. This is Ricky. He's a Driver61 subscriber, but he's never driven on track before.
You've been in a single-seater before? Does a go-kart count?
And today, I'm going to coach him to drive this 2012 Formula One car.
What am I doing here?
But why? Well, after 2.5 years and 245 videos, Driver61 hit 1 million subscribers. And so to give back, we picked one of you to come and drive a Formula One car.
That's why I'm here today. We chose a subscriber at random who's in the back of the van to drive today.
And off the back of that, we've built other parts of the business where we've got fluidjobs.com, which we list motorsport jobs. We've got some educational programs as well, where we help students learn more about the industry that they're going to go into, so they can bolster their CV, but also understand, what it's like under the hood of being an aerodynamicist or a race engineer and whatever it might be. So yeah, it's been a really unusual journey, let's say, but really, really interesting.
Sounds great. Well, let's try and take it back right to the beginning and start from the young age. What first pulled you into motorsport then? What was the what kind of made it feel sort of really serious at a young age?
I mean, it's always been part of my life. My father, my dad was originally a truck mechanic, a mobile truck mechanic, but eventually his career took him into owning a race team. So I was incredibly lucky from the beginning that I was kind of born into a racing family. It was just grassroots racing cars that he ran at that point. But yeah, fortunate enough that at 4 years old, he gave me a go-kart to go around the playing fields in. And obviously, being a 4-year-old kid, absolutely loved it. And that was the start of my karting career.
Love that as well. We were talking off air just a moment ago about how you introduced your little one to karting recently. But looking back, what did the karting teach you that kind of still matters today?
There's a lot, right? And it's fresh in my mind because I'm just thinking about how do I approach this with my 5-year-old now. There's a lot that it teaches you, obviously depending on how the direction that your parent points you in, right? But karting is a fantastic way to understand, first of all, how to win and lose, how to manage that. Even at 5 years old, I'm working on the mentality of my little boy, and not worrying whether we're first or 15th. Just, did you do your best? But also, it's a great opportunity at that age to teach my boy how to work, how to practice, how to understand things, how to improve, the lessons along the way, how to take advice. And it's just, I mean, of course, I'm biased, right? I love motorsport, but I just think it's a fantastic environment. And even at that age, I can see that he is like so passionate about it. He's learning so much. And yeah, I just think it's a really valuable tool.
Do you see a little bit of yourself in him going around the track and the way he is and how he's conducting himself?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think his better than his impressed me a lot. Just like and I talk about a 5-year-old, right? I have to remind myself that it's 5. Also, I was a professional coach for 15 years, right? So I'm trying I'm being very careful not to push him into it. I'm allowing him to have the space to show me that he wants to do it. I definitely don't want to be a pushy parent. And I think I'm probably sat on the opposite side of it, where I'm so conscious of that I'm not pushing him into it. But yeah, of course, I see myself in him. And I think the beautiful thing is being able to coach him and work with him on how to handle these situations. And at 5 years old, they just absorb it. And he's so like level-headed, but then aggressive on the track. It's wild.
Yeah, love that. Brilliant. So you won Euroboss at 18, I think. Reading some of your background. How did that change things for you, kind of opportunity-wise and sort of mindset-wise at that age?
Yeah, so Euroboss, for those who don't know, this was 2004. So it was a championship in Europe where you could drive up to, I think the youngest car that you could drive was 6 years outside of Formula One. So in 2004, I drove a 1997 Benetton. So it was 7 years old. And I was 18 years old, as you mentioned. So it was very unusual back then for an 18-year-old to jump into this ex-Formula One car. We tried to go down the normal route, right, which at the time was Formula Renault. Formula BMW had just started. So kind of like similar to F4 nowadays. But it was about 150 grand a year to do that. And we didn't have the family money to go and do it. So it was all off sponsorship. And it was about the same money to race the Formula One car in the Euroboss series. And so the challenge of raising 150 grand when you're 18 is massive, of course. It's not like we've got loads of friends that we could just go and ask, for the money. But it was a bit easier when we were like, okay, we're going to stick an 18-year-old in an F1 car. It's an F1 car. You're not going to be at Snetterton on a rainy weekend in a Formula Renault. You're going to be at Paul Ricard in the sun with an F1 car there. So that's a much easier sell for the people that we were approaching to sponsor the car. And it ended up working. Now, the downside of it is Euroboss isn't the most competitive championship, right? It wasn't as competitive as Formula Renault. You've got Hamilton was in Formula Renault at the time, De Resta, Conway, these types of drivers that have all obviously gone on to be successful drivers. That said, we didn't have any options, and I did that championship. I won the championship. We got lap records at most of the circuits, outright lap records. So we got a ton of press off the back of it. We were in Autosport every other week. I got nominated for the McLaren Young Driver of the Year award, won a couple of awards along the way, went and tested with Red Bull Arden at the end of that year. So it did its job. It was a brilliant series. And of course, driving a V10 Formula One car is just unbelievable. I've gone on since to drive, another 25, 30 different F1 cars. So it kind of opened that door for me as well as being someone who could set up an old F1 car.
Brilliant. You alluded to earlier on about the kind of budget constraints, and lack of funding and things like that for an 18-year-old. But budget constraints are quite common in motorsport. And how did you kind of navigate around that, or didn't you?
No, we didn't. So when I was 16, when I jumped into cars, we did like grassroots racing. Thankfully, my father could afford to run that car. He could run the car, right? Because so he was just buying tires and fuel and race entries. It's still a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't, it definitely wasn't in the hundreds of thousands of pounds. So after we did Boss, I then tested with Christian Horner, who still ran Arden at that time, and they were partly sponsored by Red Bull. I went and did a 3-day test with them at Estoril, got offered a drive in the first year of GP2, so F2, that was 2005, but still needed to take £400,000. The budget was £800,000, so it was a great deal if you've got £400,000.
Wow.
And we did. Yeah. I just, I worked so hard. I pushed myself so hard to try and do that. But imagine, being 18, trying to figure out how to raise that much money. I mean, I tried, but it was going to be incredibly lucky if I ever got that together. And we didn't. I raised 150 that year going into 2005. Didn't do GP2, which was, a big shame. Then I took that money and went and raced in the US in Indy Lights, which is the level below IndyCar. So I did that 2005, 2006, no testing, just turned up, free practice on the Friday. Difficult, got top fives, had a load of DNFs. We went with a great team, all of that, all of that stuff when you don't take enough money, basically. And then what happened is we realized that even the guys that were going from Indy Lights into IndyCar were taking a load of money anyway for that first season or the second season, or even all the way through, right? IndyCar is definitely not just like the drivers aren't getting paid a load of money. I don't know what it's like nowadays, but back then you had to take money. And so then you kind of get in that state and say, well, I can't even afford to do Indy Lights. There's no way we're going to get to IndyCar. Like there's just no way. So unfortunately, we kind of realized, at that point that what can we do? And so I came back to Europe and I started coaching. I kind of lowered my expectations a bit and just started doing like pro-am driving in GT cars and prototypes from that point where you get paid for a race weekend.
It must be quite difficult though to kind of come to terms with that a little bit. You kind of your dream that you want to do, you've got a vision of where you want to be. But would you say that was probably one of your toughest career setbacks, or have there been others?
I think there's been a few moments along the way, but this was the thing that's in my it's in my blood. It's the thing that I'd been driving towards since I was a kid, right? So I'm also being careful to balance this with my own kid now. It's the thing that I've been driving to for a long time. So the moment that I really thought this is not going to happen now was about 2010. That was when I kind of mentally, that was it, right? How old would I have been then? 25. Yeah. So that was the end of it. And that was very difficult to take because you still feel unproven. You know inside that you're good, but are you really good enough? Difficult to know. So that was probably the biggest pain, was that I didn't know. Actually, last year I kind of had a bit of a breakthrough. Last year I drove a Formula E car because of the YouTube channel, which is an unusual thing. But I drove a Formula E car, and the grid of Formula E is, they're very, very quick. Might not be quite at the level of F1, who knows, but they're still very quick, proven drivers. And I went and did a few sessions in Miami, and I would have been in the mix. And given that I didn't have very much time in the car, I only had like 30 minutes in the car, it kind of helped me just, even now, right? I'm still trying to think about it, but helped me realize that, I do think I was quick enough to get there. And that's probably the thing that I wanted to prove to myself the most.
I read about it. You set one of the fastest laps, I think, at the time. Is this the collaboration you did with Lola? Is that right?
Yeah. So what happened was Formula E did some crazy collaboration with a load of creators, and so now I'm classified as a creator with the YouTube channel. So I went and drove with Lola, with the Lola Apps team. Spent a couple of days in the sim, went out to Miami, and we had two 20-minute sessions. But at the same time, the actual drivers were going out as well. Not at the same time on track, but on the same day. So I completely messed up the first session because I was, long story, but I was making the car kind of default and trip something because I was using the brake pedal too hard. Anyway, second session, I was only a tenth off their actual driver who'd just been out the same morning. So for me, given the lack of time that I had in the car, I was pretty happy that I'd proven that for myself, and I would mix it. I'd be able to mix it in the grid.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Love that. So we're going to look at that kind of pivot point where you went from the racing over to the kind of coaching and development role that you did. Let's talk about what qualities make a driver coachable or uncoachable as well in your experience.
I think probably the same as anything really is like the first of all, the ability to understand what's actually going on in their scenario. They need to be able to feel what's going on in a race car. Probably the same as any sport or even in business as well, right? They need to understand the situation of what's going on because they need to be able to understand that so that when you give them feedback, they can see how it needs to kind of change. I think I was very lucky with, 2018, 2019. The reason that I started the YouTube channel, back in 2015 was to drive drivers through to my racing school that I had. And I did a very different style of coaching where we hired a private circuit. I took them around in my car to teach them the fundamentals of race car dynamics, and how to extract the most speed, weight transfer, how you load the car up, etc. And so during those 2 years, I sat next to 120 people a year, 120 days a year I did. I capped it at that because physically I couldn't do any more. And, there's probably 100 different drivers a year. And we did the same circuit in the same car. I did 26,000 miles a year on the same track, just with different drivers. And during that time, I learned so much about how to coach and how to extract the most speed. Because a normal coach, right, and for the years before that, I would go Donington in a Ferrari on a Monday, Brands Hatch in a Porsche on a Wednesday, Caterham on a Thursday at Snetterton. So you don't get any, it's just there's too many variables involved. Whereas because we were on the same track in my car, like I knew the process so well. I learned so much about actually coaching, and when you do so many hours in a car, you just instinctively learn a process that is dramatically more efficient than anything else. It's a shame actually that we don't do it anymore because it was a brilliant program. And so all of that to say, I think that the people that I had coming to me, because they were coming through the YouTube videos that I was making that was like really technical, actually quite boring for most people, because they were coming from those, if they'd sat there and watched hours of that footage, they were very open to learn anyway, right? Because they'd already been watching the content to try and learn. So I think my funnel had filtered people down to being the perfect people. But I think the key thing that I learned during that period is there's definitely a sweet spot of learning. So if you're in a racing car, I could push somebody on and make them fast, but they wouldn't understand why. And they wouldn't be able to do it themselves then without me. There's this perfect sweet spot where you give them enough guidance where they're able to process everything, where they've got enough bandwidth to process what you're telling them and absorb it. But you're not pushing them too far, because as soon as you push them too far, they're just doing like a robot, doing exactly what you say, and then nothing sticks. So that's probably the biggest thing, is understanding how hard to push them.
Brilliant. That's really good. Really good. So let's talk about Driver61 then. You kind of alluded to the YouTube thing earlier on, that you were kind of people going through your driving school. So you created that. But why did you start Driver61 and what problem were you trying to solve at that time?
At that point, I'd been racing and coaching around the world, which was fantastic fun while I was in my 20s. And then, 2015, I was 30. And I just decided that I wanted to stop the traveling. Those years, 4 years before that, I was abroad more than I was at home. And little trips, 3 to 7 day trips. I was just always on a plane, 80, 90 flights a year. Crazy. So it was just too much. And I'd always wanted to do my own thing. And so, basically I just started. I just started doing it. And it grew from there, made plenty of mistakes along the way. It actually just started as a website with articles. And then I didn't particularly enjoy the kind of writing process, and, explaining driving technique is a bit easier with some graphs and being able to move your hands and explain weight transfer.
Yeah.
So I ended up just moving across to video. And at the beginning, I didn't really know what I was doing with the driving school. And actually, I had a failed business attempt before that point. I was just trying to build an audience with the knowledge that I had. And back then, no coach had shared the information online like I did and given it away for free. It was actually quite a new concept back then. So I thought, what? Let's go and create some attention. Let's go and get out there. Let's help people get quicker on track, do something good. Something good will happen after that. So I gave myself 6 months, had enough money for 6 months, and got my head down and started working.
Love that. How do you decide what content to put out though? Most of the videos you've got are so engaging and really, you choose topics that kind of really pique people's interest, but how do you decide on what to go out with?
Well, the start of the channel to now is 10 years, just over 10 years old. So there's been a lot of learning along the way. It's kind of like racing, right? We spend a lot of time in the data, understanding what's going on. But you learn. The most important thing on YouTube is the topic, right? Is the thing interesting? And so you learn how to take a topic that might not necessarily seem that interesting when you first look at it, but package it in a way that will be interesting to both our core audience and a wider population, right? That's the key thing, is will this be interesting to the nerdiest F1 fan? And can we do it in a way that we're not talking down to them, but also 2 million people can also follow along and watch and find interesting? When you do that, then you get 2-3 million views on YouTube.
Yeah, brilliant. And you mentioned core audience. Who would you say your core audience is? Is it people looking to break into industry? Is it people that are in the industry already?
So for us, the YouTube channel does a mixture of things. In terms of business, we generate revenue from our advertisers and our partners, and then with the educational programs that we do. So when we're talking about the people who are looking for roles, it's it might only be 5% of people in our audience, but the audience is massive, right? So so they are people who are into engineering but like to look at that engineering through the lens of Formula One or motorsport, and often the kind of extreme engineering excellence that goes on within motorsport. That's how we frame the channel. And so that's who our core audience is for the education side of things. They are people who are looking to transfer from other industries into motorsport, or students who are 2 or 3 years into their degree. They might be doing mechanical engineering, but they want to understand, do they want to become an aerodynamicist? Do they want to do race engineering? Do they want to do tire? What part of motorsport do they want to fall into?
Brilliant. Yeah, because you do cover quite a large area. I've saw some of the aerodynamic stuff that you've been doing, and you have some key figures from the industry as well that will come in and help and teach. Is that right?
Yeah, we've been, these are things that happen things get easier, right? As you build a business and build a reputation, I think these things get easier, as long as your reputation's good, I suppose. For example, we were the first YouTube channel that Ferrari have ever partnered with the brand themselves. So I was in Maranello the end of last year filming with them, and the content's going out now. If you look on Ferrari's, their social assets, their Instagram, and this is the Ferrari main brand, you'll see me over some of their content, which is just, it's incredible to me still that they have trusted us in that way. But this is something where I think, people think about YouTube and they think about maybe Mr. Beast or kind of very YouTube-y type of content, if you know what I mean. But for me, what YouTube means is the ability to create content that is in line with, what I value, and do that in the way that I want to, and it will still find its niche audience. And a niche on YouTube can be 1 million views a video, right? And so that's why I love YouTube. We try to make like Netflix level documentaries now, and we're still improving, right? But yeah, YouTube is a brilliant platform for that, because you can do that. You can make whatever you want. And if you do it right, you can get a lot of views. And now what's happening over the last couple of years is that more and more of it is being watched on TV. 50 or 60% of our views come from TVs, which means that the people are sat back, sat on their couch, actually, paying attention, rather than maybe watching it on their mobile while they're on the train or whatever it might be. So it's a really interesting space.
Brilliant. That's really good. How do you design your driver development programs then? What's the framework behind that?
So we actually don't do the driver development anymore, unfortunately, operationally it was quite challenging to run, because when a driver would go on a test day or a track day, they're constantly overtaking cars or being overtaken, which means they're constantly distracted, which means that no 2 laps are generally the same, and they struggle to get into a rhythm. So when I designed the driver training program, it was around distilling everything down to its simplest form, and making it in the simplest way that it can be, so that a driver can learn it as quickly as possible and have these building blocks. And then throughout the day, we would build those things together, and eventually they would be able to balance the car perfectly, trail brake perfectly into the corner. So that was the general philosophy of it, was break everything down into its simplest form, do those things, and then gradually throughout the day build up, like you would learn a language, right? If you do Duolingo or anything, you learn a word with a picture, and then you gradually get to complex sentences. We did the same, but nobody does that in driver coaching. You go to Donington, go on a track day, and you just try and go as fast as you can. It's the worst learning environment that you could possibly have. So we took a different view on that. What I was going on to say is the reason that we don't run it now, and it was operationally difficult, was because we needed to not do it on a track day. A track day might be £300 for a car and driver, right? I wanted to do it on a private track, so that there was no distraction, or a very, very quiet track. Problem with that is it's difficult to find a circuit, and it's expensive then when you do that. So we had a couple of circuits that we went to, and eventually they got closed down. They didn't run it in the same way anymore. So what used to cost us, £300 or £400 a day, was then going to cost £2,000 a day. And then the business model goes out the window, unfortunately. But in terms of designing it, it was definitely distilling everything down to its simplest form, repeating that 20 times, getting it embedded in the driver's brain, and correlating the feeling in the body to what they're actually doing with the inputs of the car. It was all about distilling everything down to the simplest form. For example, even the initial part where you get on a throttle, right? So imagine you're coming into a corner, you make the apex, and then you pick up the throttle again to come back out the corner.
Yeah.
Lots of drivers don't really realize how smooth this transition needs to be. So we had a runway. It was at Bruntingthorpe. We had a 2-mile runway, and I would literally go down there and say, accelerate, lift, let the car decelerate, and then get back on the throttle. And they'd get back on the throttle, and poof, you'd feel it in your back. You'd say, no, that's too hard. That's, you're getting on it way too hard. Do it again. We'd do it 20 times, and then eventually they'd get it, and they'd realize how smooth they needed to be. Whereas they could go on 100 track days and never get that insight because it's just too busy and too noisy. There's too much going on. So we did that. And we broke all of driving down into 30 different tiny bits and then gradually built them together.
Brilliant. Love that. Let's talk a little bit more about Driver61 and the platform. Can you tell the listeners what you cover, if they click into your website now, what are they likely to find, and what areas can you help them with?
Well, Fluidjobs is probably for your audience is probably the better website to go on. So I haven't done any for probably 6 months now, but over the last couple of years, I've spoken to many people involved in HR at the F1 teams, at the motorsport teams, as you know, as I know you have as well. And I was on a mission to try and just understand exactly how it worked. Right, I've not worked in a Formula One team, but I know that's the dream of many students, many people around the world. And so I spoke to the HR representatives, the heads of departments, and actually people who had managed to get an internship or a job in a Formula One team as well, to try and understand, what is the best way to approach this. And I very quickly learned that, when an aerodynamicist role goes online, the teams are getting 1,000 plus CVs. And so, as with the on-track action, the competition to be an aerodynamicist or a race engineer is massive. And so how do you stand out? How do you get to the top of that pile and actually get an interview?
Love that. That's brilliant. I was going to come on to that. So you obviously created Fluidjobs. Were you seeing a gap in anything at the time when you created Fluidjobs? You spoke to, like you said, loads of HR people, but you must have seen a demand at that time to kind of go, this is something that we need to develop.
Yeah, well, I just didn't think there was that much information out there in the world. And it goes back to when I started Driver61, right? I took a bit of a punt and said, people charge for this information sometimes, but I'm just going to create some content about it and build an audience. And so it's just a case of, what you're doing here, jumping on, doing a podcast, doing an interview, learning a lot and putting it out into the world for free and hoping that some people find value about it. So beyond that, there wasn't a huge amount of thought, I'll be honest with you. It was more about, okay, we want to have an arm of Driver61 where we help people find roles in Formula One or wider motorsport. So what do those people need? Well, they need help and advice and content on how to do that. And, of course, the audience isn't anywhere near as big as it is on Driver61, but we are giving people more value in terms of if they are looking for a job, then they can watch all of those videos, as with your content, and learn a little bit more and get themselves ahead of the game.
Brilliant. Love that. Where can people find Fluidjobs and Driver61, Scott?
So it depends what you're looking for. Driver61, if you're looking for something to watch while you're having your dinner, go to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Driver61. For everything else with Driver61, look on driver61.com. And then if you're into looking for a role in motorsport or Formula One, we've got fluidjobs.com, which has a lot of articles on there. We've also got the Fluidjobs YouTube channel as well, which has a lot of the interviews that I conducted.
Love that. A couple more questions for you. So, best car you've ever driven? Or favourite car ever driven?
Favourite car I've ever driven? Drove that's hard. A 1992 Benetton B190. The
one.
The yellow.
Yeah,
one. That was cool.
Yeah, fantastic. Where did you drive? Race it? Drive it?
I tested it for somebody at Zolder in Belgium. It's 8-pattern gearbox, 700 brake horsepower. And I jumped out and just thought, I don't know how those guys did 2 hours of a Grand Prix in that thing, because it is you're hanging on to it.
Really?
Yeah.
Looking ahead, then, what are you most excited about?
Just continue. I enjoy the building of the company. I enjoy it so much that actually I think it's a hindrance to me. Like, I just get so excited by different ideas. I often try and do too many things. So I always try to remain focused. But we're continuing to partner with experts in the Formula One field, the engineering Formula One field. So we are currently building a couple more aerodynamic education programs, as well as race engineering and vehicle dynamics. So really looking forward to those going out into the world. And then on the kind of content side, we are now acting as like an agency, a motorsport engineering specific agency. It's quite niche, whereby we will help like an F1 technical sponsor to create content that actually, gets viewed, rather than, that typically they're not particularly great at making content. So we're acting as an agency to make content for these big companies.
Brilliant. Watch this space then with that. Sounds interesting. And best career advice you've ever received?
Oh. In speaking to people who've gone a long way in Formula One as an engineer or an aerodynamicist or whatever it might be, there's kind of three things that stand out. First of all, they don't go straight into Formula One. They work their way up and they're okay with that. Secondly, they never give up. They have a racing driver's mentality there. They are banging the door down and they keep on going. And the ones that have gone quite a long way, they show an incredible amount of initiative. Like, they'll be on the weekend, they'll be coding like a lap simulation software program or something like this. And then eventually one of these things actually gets used. And then then they're on their way and they become the head of the department. I think they're the three key things that I've seen, and I'm sure you've got your view on that, and you've seen plenty of people as well. But they're the things that kind of stand out to me. Yeah, and I think it's the same in anything, right? If you're racing, if you're in a different industry, it's just that mentality.
Thanks for that, Scott, and I really appreciate all the advice that you've given to our listeners today. And I hope it's given our listeners a little bit more of an insight around Driver61 and Fluidjobs. Nothing left for me to do other than to say thanks very much for your time and all the best for the future. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.